You know, for Stanley, it was a continual process. When we shot Barry Lyndon, it was 50 ASA. That was the fastest color stock. And when we got to The Shining, it was 100. It was a faster film, and there were faster lenses. And it meant that he could not always just keep coming back with the same kind of lighting setups. He was forced to actually think differently.
He says, Joe, this is my Bible. The name of the book is Pudovkin on Film. He had that book on Paths of Glory, and he had the book on The Shining 20 years later. He says, take a look at this, Joe. Each page was yellowed, liner notes. He says, I read this constantly and I get different ideas. This is the most magnificent book ever written for anybody who wants to direct.
We did go to Hollywood to make The Killing only because we couldn't find a racetrack back east that would cooperate with us. So we found out that a racetrack in San Francisco, I believe it was Bay Meadows, agreed to allow us to film there.
And the crew was put together under the cameraman Lucien Ballard. Well, Lucien was one of the top guys in town. I think there was a slow period, so he took on a relatively low-budget film. And he'd heard a lot about Stanley. And Lucien was the exact antithesis of Stanley in every way.
Lucien Ballard dressed like a dandy, you know, I mean, he was beautifully dressed, and Stanley came in looking like he didn't get waited on in the store. When we came to Hollywood to do The Killing, we were quite young. We were still in our 20s, and it was kind of unusual for people to be working with someone so young, particularly as a director. Now, Stanley sees every film that was made, so he was up on all of the accomplishments of the different cinematographers, and he selected Lucien Ballard because he was a terrific cameraman. What happened was that Stanley, having photographed his own feature films, Fear and Desire and Killer's Kiss, was very specific about what he wanted in terms of the photography. And Lucien Ballard was also very specific, and sometimes they had different views on how it should be done. But Stanley always felt that the light should be coming from somewhere that looks like it's real. Is it coming from the street? Is it coming through the window? So you can imagine a well-established, old guard Hollywood cameraman now taking orders from a New York young punk that's just come in and calling all the shots. Like the only time I've ever witnessed this is that the cameraman did not come to the dailies. He did not come to, I mean, I've never heard of that.
The film required a documentary, legitimate kind of establishment of a real environment, because it was all shot in Los Angeles, in sets primarily. And it needed to establish the racetrack. So Lucien put together 12 men, 4 cameras, and everything that a crew needs shooting on location. We screened the film, we meaning Stanley and Jimmy and myself. And Stanley stood up and said, I'm going to fire him. I mean, that's it. He's finished. Jimmy says, wait a minute. Let's think about this very serious move. It looks bad. Let's try and figure out what happened. Well, what happened was, well, you're talking to an Academy Award-winning, top-notch guy, and he knows exactly what has to be done, background footage, to make it come alive. And he can't do it. Now, why can't he do it? Well, he can't do it because you can't set up brute arcs and 4 cameras and have the crowd do what you wanted to do. He did what he assumed would be acceptable. Now, Jimmy had been in the Army with me, and we were both cameramen. And we knew what had to be done, and Stanley knew also. What had to be done is what we did in Day of the Fight, which is a camera this big in your hands with an eye behind a combat cameraman's eye. Well, the question was, who's going to shoot this? Stanley says, Alex, you ready to go? I said, sure. He said, so what do you want? I said, well, you know, an IMO and 1,000 feet of 100-foot loads of film and a brown paper bag, which I'll carry it in. And I'll carry it in because a young guy running around with a bag full of film and a crappy little combat camera, nobody's going to pay any attention to him. I'm some kind of nut that's taking movies. And the way I wanted to do it, which was without interfering with the movement of people, to become somehow part of the crowd and to be unobtrusive. I had gotten all the shots that I felt were useful. What Stanley did is he used it as a leitmotif throughout the film, which gives you a sense of the reality of where you are rather than a Hollywood set.
When we finished Lolita, we had Ozzie Morris as our cameraman, terrific British cameraman, but he was gone when we finished. Now, I came up with an idea for the titles, that we should have Humbert Humbert's hands painting the toenails of Lolita. But we have to shoot that, and Ozzie's gone. Stanley remembered a picture called The Dam Busters, photographed by a man named Gil Taylor. And so Stanley brings in Gil Taylor to do the painting of the toenails. He then uses Gil Taylor to do Dr. Strangelove. I use Gil Taylor to do the Bedford incident. Gil Taylor goes on to do Star Wars. The point I'm making is that Stanley knows different cameramen and what they do because he sees all the pictures, and that's the first thing that he zeroes in on. And so he can find obscure cameramen, or he can find people that nobody would ever think of, and have the confidence to work with them because he'll bring it out in them.